I learned that you have to be really patient and you have to kind of put yourself in your dog's shoes basically and know that just because you're giving a command doesn't necessarily mean that he's perceiving it in the same way as you think he is. And if something's not working, then you need to take a step back and think what's going on here, what's the problem, and how can I fix it?
The biggest thing is probably be cognizant of what you're doing and what the dog is doing and kind of try to put those relationships together. And then the other thing is probably just be, really consistent and make time for even a little bit of it every day.
Recommended daily practice, 2 15-minute sessions. Also practice say please by sitting and rewarding calm behavior at every opportunity. View several steps at a time before starting, and review as needed. There are 16 easy steps in this stage of training, and they fly by quickly when you do them correctly. In fact, this stage can take as little as 2 days to complete. In each of the steps, you'll send your dog to his rug from 5 to 10 feet away so he gets practice placing. And then you'll present distractions while your dog stays in a downstay for 1 minute. For the first 8 steps, you'll present treats every 3 seconds while providing distractions, and then in the remaining steps, you'll increase the interval between treats. Start by setting the treat and train to single treat, fixed interval, and a treat dispensing rate of 3 seconds. Now hitting the downstay button will start the 1-minute session, and the treat and train will automatically dispense treats every 3 seconds, starting at 3 seconds. While this stage of training is easiest using the automatic dispensing feature, you can always elect to use cue dispense mode so that you get a cue every 3 seconds but control the dispensing manually. This requires a little more coordination though. As in the downstay section of training, if your dog gets up prematurely, you can press the downstay button again to end the session early. Now let's get started. Step 1. The walking human distraction. Start by sending your dog to his rug, and when he's lying down, start the session by pressing the downstay button. Next, begin walking while the treat and train dispenses treats every 3 seconds. When you walk, start by making it easy. That is, first walk around in front of your dog or close by. When he seems relaxed at this level of distraction, walk farther away and walk more towards his sides or the back, and all the way around. Time the more difficult moves with the treats. You can tell what's difficult for your dog by watching his body language. For example, here I start by testing Ernie without treats. His downstay looks stable when he can easily see me, but when I walk behind him, he gets up. If your dog gets up during this exercise, end the trial and send him back to his rug. Then start a new trial, but this time be careful to prepare him by starting with easy distractions and then moving to harder distractions. Also, make sure you start your count towards 3 completed 1-minute trials over again. When I begin Ernie's formal distraction session, I make sure that I only walk behind him while he's getting a treat at first. Then I move back to an easier location before he finishes his treat. When he looks relaxed, even when I walk to the more difficult locations, I present the harder distractions more randomly. In this step, make sure you also practice walking towards and away from the door, as this often distracts dogs into getting up. At the end of a trial, when the amber light turns off telling you that the session's over, manually dispense a few more treats at variable intervals and then target your dog off his rug before starting the next trial. At this stage of training, if your dog's downstay is consistently stable and your dog has a good recall, you can also practice calling your dog off his rug. Make sure he doesn't anticipate getting off, though. When your dog completes 3 1-minute trials in a row, go to step 2. Step 2, the running human distraction. In this step, intersperse short, quick movements and running. At first, time the running movements right as your dog's going for the food in the Treat&Train bowl. Once your dog's no longer excited or interested in your quick movements, present the distractions more randomly. Again, your dog's body language should tell you which moves are more difficult. For instance, Ernie's good until I run behind him. If your dog gets up, then next time you present the same distraction, make the distraction less intense. Then gradually increase the intensity. Also make sure that you present the hard distractions as your dog has his head in the Treat&Train bowl so that he's focused on the food rather than the distraction. You can move on to random presentation of the distractions once your dog looks relaxed. You can also work in any movements that you know tend to distract your dog, such as leaning over to pick something up on the floor. When your dog completes 3 one-minute trials in a row, go on to step 3. Are you getting the hang of this yet? Let's take a little test and see. Let's say your dog is great at his downstay, except when you and your friends start dancing in the house. How would you fix this problem? Pause the DVD and spend a few minutes trying to figure out what you'd do. Then compare your training plan to ours. Here's what we came up with. First, invite a friend over and have him time his dance steps as your dog's eating treats from the Treat&Train. Start with easy moves. Then go to harder moves. Then present the moves randomly. Next, you'd repeat this progression with 2 people, and before long, you'd have this. Now for loud sounds and talking. The purpose here is to mimic the shouting or loud talking your dog might hear when you go to answer the door.
Hello?
With your dog lying on his rug and treats coming every 3 seconds, practice talking, shouting, cheering, or making sudden loud sounds.
Somebody get the door!
As usual, first time these distractions so they occur right as your dog's going for the food in the Treat&Train bowl. When your dog looks relaxed, start presenting the distractions randomly.
Hello, who's at the door? Is anybody there?
Hi, come on in.
Make sure the sounds aren't loud enough to scare your dog. In this case, Ernie's ear and head position show that he's afraid when he hears men shouting.
Maybe they should try knocking. Come in! I said come in!
He eventually gets up.
Come in!
Distraction 4, toys far away. From here on, once your dog completes 2 successful trials in a row, you can go on to the next step. This is one of the most difficult distractions. If your dog likes toys and you can teach him to stay in a downstay for this, you'll have no problem with other distractions. If your dog doesn't care about toys at all, you can skip this step. Of course, if you've already worked on the rewarding calm behavior exercises involving toys, this step will be a cinch.
Get it.
Begin by taking a toy that your dog likes, such as a squeaky toy or a ball. With your dog lying on his rug 10 feet away, bounce or squeak the toy while he's eating his treat. This dog Meggie loves playing with toys and gets very excited when I squeak the toy. So at first I don't squeak every time she eats a treat. Rather, I wait until she's calm enough. Notice that as soon as she lifts her head to look at the distraction, I remove the toy and stop the distracting. At this point, if I kept distracting or made the distraction more intense, she would get up. Here she is again. Now she's more focused on the treats, but she still looks up between treats because I'm dispensing the treats too slowly. Now I increase the treat rate and she remains focused on the treats instead of the toy the entire time. If your dog gets really excited about toys like Meggie does, and gets up more than 2 times at this step, even though he's motivated for the food treat, then take a break and work on having him perform short downstays on his rug in order to have his toy tossed. I'll demonstrate with Cowboy. First get your dog to lie down on his rug, then bounce or squeak the toy a few times. Make the distraction small enough so that your dog can be successful. When he stays on his rug, reward him by giving him a verbal release cue such as OK, and then toss the ball for him. This release word is important in telling him when he should stay versus when it's okay to run after the toy. Never let him get a hold of the toy without your permission, or you'll reward him for getting up on his own. If your dog tends to run away from you with the toy, you can keep him on leash for this exercise so that you don't have to get into a game of chase. And if your dog refuses to give the toy up, trade him for a treat. After about 10 toy tosses, he'll start getting into the habit of just coming back and dropping the toy to get his treat. Then, after a few more toy tossing sessions, when he's formed a habit, you won't have to exchange a treat for the toy. If needed, review the section on rewarding calm behavior where you wait for your dog to lie down in order to play fetch outside. Practice in sets of 5 to 10 toy tosses. Once your dog consistently waits for your verbal cue to get his toy, you can go back to step 4A. In step 4B, present the toy at random intervals from 10 feet away. Cowboy looks pretty relaxed here. Again, if the treats were coming out every 3 seconds, he would be looking at the Treat&Train the whole time. Here's Meggie too. Notice that her attention is now focused on the Treat&Train rather than the ball. If treats were coming slower, she'd probably be more interested in the ball and might even get up, because I haven't yet taught her to lie down on her rug to have her toy tossed. In this step, we present the toy closer. Stand up to 5 feet away and time the toy distraction right as your dog's getting his treat. Here's Cowboy again. He's much more focused on the Treat&Train now. When your dog's good for 2 1-minute trials in a row, go to step 5B. Remember to target your dog between trials or to play fetch. Now we go to presenting the distraction randomly. Your dog should be completely focused on getting the treats from the Treat&Train before you go on to the next step. You can also add different toys and work in more intense distractions where you toss the toy or get it really close like we do with the next several dogs. As with the earlier steps, at first present the distraction as your dog's receiving his treat. Remember to make sure that your dog never gets the toy unless you give him the okay. When your dog's good for several trials in a row, then present the distractions more randomly. If he makes several errors, then go back to decreasing the distraction intensity, or go back to timing the distraction with the treat. For the rest of the distraction training, place the Treat&Train near the door. With treats coming every 3 seconds, knock on the door or on the walls every time your dog has his head buried in the Treat&Train bowl. Start by knocking softly enough so that your dog barely orients to the sound, and make sure you knock softly enough so that your dog does not respond by barking. Once you complete 2 consecutive 1-minute trials, go on to step 6B, louder knocking. If needed, increase the volume in 3 or more steps. Here's Ernie in step 6B, loud knocking. For the purpose of this DVD, I dispense treats more slowly than I'm supposed to, and as a result, even from behind, you can tell that Ernie's orienting to the sound of the knocking. Make sure you wait until your dog's going for the treat to knock. Despite the slow treat rate, within the first 1-minute trial, Ernie's focused on the Treat&Train and ignores the knocking. This looks pretty simple, but just listen to what these dog owners have to say.
Well, one thing I would say is make sure you don't reward the wrong behavior.
I ended up actually rewarding her for barking accidentally. I was beeping at the wrong time. She was on the mat, but she was still barking, and I ended up doing the beep and giving her the treats when she was barking, so I reinforced the barking and got more barking, so I had to correct that.
One thing we did that was a mistake is we actually rewarded him for barking with the Treat&Train machine, and so we had to go backwards and spend some time unraveling that.
These owners accidentally rewarded barking because their treat rate was too low and the distractions too high. The low treat rate gave the dogs ample time to bark. Then the dogs were rewarded as or right after they barked. Like so. Here's how the distraction and treats should be timed. Notice I'm knocking as Carrie's nose is touching the Treat&Train food bowl. Here I'm knocking too early. Here I knock too late. Once your dog progresses from soft knocks timed with the treats to very loud knocks timed with the treats, you can go to randomly timed loud knocking. Also, if you have multiple dogs, once the dog in training is good alone, you can practice with another dog present. In this step, we practice opening and closing the front door. With treats coming every 3 seconds, open and close the front door right as your dog's eating. You may first have to start by just touching the doorknob or rattling the lock as he's eating. You'll be able to tell by his body language. Here we can clearly see when this dog, Casey, orients towards the door sounds. Notice that when he focuses on the distraction more than on eating, or he stops to look around, I wait until he starts eating again to present the distraction again. In this case, we're using a new food that Casey likes at first, but then he loses interest. Here he is once I change to a type of dry food that he's had before and likes. Within the first minute, he starts relaxing, so I increase the distraction intensity by opening and closing the door. I start by opening a quarter of the way and quickly shutting. You should also practice walking in and out the door and pretend you're talking to someone outside.
Hello? Hello, Ralph? Hello?
When your dog's good for 2 one-minute trials in a row where you can open the door all the way and keep it open, go to step 8. In this door step, if your dog gets up and runs to the door, you can send him back to his place, but if he doesn't immediately go back, then you should just close the door or block access to the door and then wait for him to go back to his rug on his own. We'll go over this in more detail in the next chapter. Now combine all distractions with treats coming every 3 seconds and add the doorbell. We'll start with Maggie. As you can see, she barks exuberantly at the doorbell. Make sure you wait until your dog is getting its treats to ring the doorbell. She barks once here, and I wait until she's calm before ringing again. Watch for other barking episodes. Usually they occur when I increase the frequency of ringing by continuing to ring after she's finished eating. Each time she barks, I give her time to calm down before ringing again. I also decrease the amount of rings the next time. When your dog's relaxed with this added distraction, present the doorbell randomly. If you're having problems with the doorbell distraction, you can just practice with this distraction alone. Here we work on just the doorbell with Cowboy. Notice that Cowboy looks like he wants to run to the door when he hears the doorbell. Then when his owner rings the doorbell while he's looking up instead of when he's eating, he gets up. Best to have the Treat and Train on automatic and single dispense with treats coming every 3 seconds, otherwise it can be difficult to coordinate the distraction with the treat. This time his owner's timing is good, but the treats are coming too slowly. He'll get up again in a few seconds. Now we have the treats automatically coming every 3 seconds. Notice that sometimes Cowboy looks around after getting his treat. When he does, we wait until he looks more stable before ringing the doorbell again. Here's how your dog should look with the doorbell distraction. Now I move to presenting the doorbell randomly and Ringo starts to get up, but his owner blocks him. After that, he doesn't try to get up again, because he knows he won't be able to get to the door. Here's one more example. Be sure to present all distractions at the highest intensity that you've practiced before you move on. When your dog is relaxed and stable with all distractions combined and presented randomly for 2 consecutive 1-minute trials, go to step 9. In the remaining steps, we'll focus on increasing the interval between treats. We'll start with treats coming every 5 seconds. Here's Bailey demonstrating. Notice that in most examples, the Treat and Train and rug were fairly close to the door. This makes it easier to block your dog if he gets up. Now increase the treat interval to 7 seconds. Make sure you present the distraction at a high enough intensity during these early steps so that your dog will be prepared for the later steps when he gets fewer treats. In step 11, dispense treats every 10 seconds. Between trials, alternate between targeting your dog a few times or playing fetch or practicing your recall and placing a few times for variety. Now treats should come every 15 seconds. Remember that to speed up the training, you should have your dog offer a sit or down for privileges such as getting his leash on or going out for walks. In fact, if he's near the door, he should lie down on his rug.
Okay.
We're almost done, just 10 minutes of training to go before you get to practice with guests. This time have the Treat&Train dispense treats every 20 seconds. Don't forget that on days when it's inconvenient to have a formal training session, you should still feed your dog in an automatic downstay session. In step 14, we dispense treats every 30 seconds. Make sure you keep up on the placing practice. Your dog will need a strong placing response for the next stage of training when visitors come to the door. Now dispense treats at 45 seconds and a minute. Remember that every interaction you have with your dog is a training session. That means that dogs like Callie, who have a history of jumping excessively, should say please by sitting for all attention, even when you're not having a formal training session. This is the last step, so your dog's downstay with distractions should be rock solid. Congratulations, your dog's completed the downstay with distractions. Now it's time for the final stage of training, practicing with visitors.